Good evening and welcome to the Milford Board of Selectmen meeting for March 7, 2019. The first agenda item is the signing of the warrant.
I'll motion to approve.
I'll second that.
I would make that unanimous. The second is the approval of the minutes from the February 25th regular session.
Move to approve.
I'm going to abstain, Mike. I wasn't here for the second half, just to make it easier.
This is the regular session.
Regular session? Okay,
Regular session,
I'll second
I'm sorry.
that. No, that's okay.
And I'll make that unanimous. And now is the approval of the executive session for February 25th.
Move, Mr. Chairman.
And I would second that and make that unanimous as well. Invitation to speak. Is anybody here for invitation to speak? Not seeing anybody. We'll move on to public hearings. Is anybody here for a public hearing? There are no public hearings tonight. Scheduled appointments. We have the police chief and the fire chief here for department updates. Gentlemen, come on up. And if you don't mind, before you start, I just publicly want to go on record that we, as we should have, we brought in members of your force that did a phenomenal job saving a lot of lives that night. And I was lax in that I didn't recognize the two of you gentlemen, the leaders of the department, for your leadership and for the great job that you do every single day leading those men and women in what they do. And so, before I let you do your update, I just publicly wanted to say that I apologize that I didn't recognize you that evening. And as one member of the Board of Selectmen, I wanted to say thank you, and we're very fortunate to have people like you leading our fire and police departments. And with that,
Thank you. Want me to go? We'll flip for it.
Alphabetically.
Departments is in a really good position right now. We've had a fairly good turnover in the past year to 6 months, so we're getting a lot of new faces coming through the door, want to learn, that are excited about the job, and some of the guys that I've worked with my whole career are now heading out to bigger and better things. But last year we did just over 5,400 runs. Very busy. We got the two new trucks in service, the Rescue and the Ladder, and they're both, everybody's trained on them. Everybody's comfortable with them. They're both performing the way we want them to perform. This year we'll be going for a replacement engine, which is on the long-term capital plan. We had a staff car we're gonna go for in the fall, but we've moved that to the spring as a result of a motor vehicle accident, and that vehicle's out of service. Fortunately, no one was injured. The other driver was cited, so we might be able to recoup a little bit of value on the vehicle going forward. We're also I'm gonna push for increased staffing. I've got several different scenarios I'll push forward to you people and the finance people, and see if we can accomplish one of them. But other than that, we're in a good place. The department's going good. They're training hard and performing well.
thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think the events that occurred here on North Bow Street speak to a long-term relationship between the police and fire department that you don't find in other communities, frankly. I worked very hard with his brother John, and then Bill as well, when he was deputy chief, to set a tempo of what the expectations are in this community, and you saw it. And if you asked that dispatcher that night, Jay Cavino, he would have told you. You know, I did what I was trained to do. I did what, from the perspective of this is the right thing to do. And likewise with the firefighters that went in there, when the police officers could not get in there to save that woman's life, and those police officers that went in. I think it speaks to those relationships. It speaks to what they believe in. So if you set aside budgets and equipment and everything else, what are you instilling in them as individuals? And as Bill mentioned, he's hired a number of young people, as have I. And you met some of them. There have been others subsequently, and there'll be many more. The whole department, as I told the board a couple of years ago, will be replaced in the next couple of years. I believe in them. I believe in them every single day, and I believe in this fire department to no end. I have the utmost respect. As far as how the department, I'm on target as far as budget goes. It's 0.5%. 0.5% this time of year is God's grace. You're not bad off. So we're okay financially. Moving forward, the special operations team, there's been some adjustments, but they're in the schools. There was an article in the Patch recently that they're actually in there introducing themselves to administrators, teachers, kids, spending time with them, so that when they have to be at a school, it's not a shock factor.
Right.
We had the threat, kid said he had a gun, he wasn't even at the school, he was home. But that caused a lot of, just angst. To build those relationships where those officers are there now, it's second nature. It's not something bad's going on, you're here to protect us. And it's made a huge difference. So they spend time walking through, so they know the environment as well. We continue to do training with the school department as far as our active shooter training, which we've done now for 16 years, along with the fire department, the medical staff from the ER, and community ambulance. So that's ongoing as well during the school vacation period. And the schools right now are a big focus. That and the hospital. The hospital, more and more and more, we're spending more and more time there. They serve right now over 20 communities. So you bring people there that can be unruly, violent, and we're the people that have to come in and take care of it and help them out. So the relationships, we walk through every shift. They're required to do it. The special operations people, when they're working, that's another walkthrough. So they know people on a first name basis. And knowing the staff is critically important. So we're in good shape. I anticipate that, we'll see some more officers retiring. We've sponsored a number of auxiliary special officers through the academy that we can bring back. Local kids that graduated, they're working in other departments, and they want to come back here to Milford. So the savings are huge. When I started doing that, I told this board and I told the finance committee, you'll save well over $1.5 million. You have. Because you don't have to pay them while they're in training. You don't have to pay someone to fill their overtime. And you're hiring a young person that grew up here, that knows this town inside out, knows people by their first names, and it's a huge, huge difference.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, I'll open it up to the board.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's great to have both chiefs here at the same time, because there's, a lot of synergy between the department. They work together, and, I've said it for a very long time that, there aren't egos and involved in how, and as a result of the egos removed that you might see in other towns and other departments, the relationship between police and fire and the combined dispatch really works well, and it's a credit to both of you. We mentioned the other night our recognizing of the dispatcher, police, and fire that responded to the building next door, and resulting in people getting woken up in the middle of the night and rousted out of their sleep to get out of a burning building. What struck me afterwards is the humility at which everybody, dispatcher, police, firemen, looked at the work that they did and said, to the chief's point, this is how they're trained. And so it's that training, Chief, that you mentioned that they come in with. It's the training that they continue to receive on an ongoing basis that helps them feel confident. My conversations with some of the firemen after were about, they gain the confidence through that training, right? Where we talk about where most of us would run, police and fire we would run away, they run in. And to a man, they said that's because that's the way we're trained. And repeated training and repeated scenario drills help to foster that. I still think it goes beyond that. It takes special people, but training is a part of it, right? I know this board at various times has called upon police, fire, when I think about the opioid epidemic and the special ops. This board had asked for what we could do with respect to opioids. I know we sponsored a town meeting amendment to get some funds to be able to work with Amy and JAG and to create that environment to make sure that people were getting the services. But we can map out plays and talk about money all day. It's the people that have to go execute. And so for that, I'm appreciative. We challenge the departments in ways like that. And it's not only a challenge, it's also an effort by this board to show that we're supportive. So when we go to town meeting and fight for those things, special ops was another example where this board challenged the public safety to say, what can we do to make sure it's understood that our kids are off limits? And the response was the operations group. And so from my perspective to both of you, thank you for accepting those challenges. Thank you for executing on those challenges. Thank you for making sure that your folks are trained. And for folks that don't understand it, yes, we will spend money on new pumper trucks or new ladder trucks or new operations vehicles. But those are the tools of the trade. That's what gets you there. And we just appreciate you bringing them forward and, also showing some consideration to other boards. I know each of you at different times has stepped aside or stepped back a year to allow something else to go forward from another department while you maintained your vehicle or that ladder truck or whatever it is for another year or two, in some cases longer. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it. I appreciate the work that you do and the work that your staffs do. And the other event, the last time we met with the folks that responded so heroically, was just another example of what good public safety people we have in our midst, and how thankful we are as citizens to have them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I'm not going to reiterate everything Bill said. I certainly echo his sentiments. I just want to thank you both very much. My question, though, is for the fire chief. Staffing, we talked about that. Where are you with it? I know we're still behind. Where do we have to get to? What should the goal be?
Last year, we added one firefighter.
Okay.
And the plan was to attempt to add one each year going forward. I'm going to offer a different, that plan's still on the table. I'm going to offer an alternative.
Okay.
Which would be to bring the department up to a better staffing. It's not perfect, but it's better.
Okay.
Right now, your minimum staffing is 6 firefighters and 1 lieutenant. The night we had this fire over here, we were fortunate. It was one of the rare nights that we were at full staffing. We had 8 firefighters on duty and a lieutenant.
So it's 8 and a lieutenant, that's full staffing.
Yes, that's full staffing. What I'd like to do is I'd like to propose to keep in the contract, it's 6 firefighters and a lieutenant. I'd like to get the funding to voluntarily bring it up to 7 firefighters.
Okay.
It's a step in the right direction. I'll come up with a price. It's cheaper than hiring new employees. You'd be filling it through overtime.
Okay.
It's an alternative.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was still, you know, obviously, I'm sure it's on your front burner. I just want to make sure you keep it on this board's, because we
Yeah.
promised to support you to get there.
If I don't get the money to bring the staffing to 7-1, I'll look for the single firefighter.
Okay, and when are you
At a
doing that? Are
minimum.
you doing that now in your
Yes,
budget?
yes.
Great. That's all I have.
And that's between both firehouses?
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
You all set?
Yeah, thank you.
So, I just want to say that, and this goes for both departments. Tom, when you wanted to come out of civil service, I sat with you and I said, why do you want to come out of civil service? And you gave me a great explanation. You said to me, Michael, when you truly believe in community policing or community fire, you want people that understand the community, people that understand the culture. And roughly 3 months ago, when we appointed those 6 new police officers, all 6 of them were raised in Milford. One of them had just moved over the Bellingham town line and bought a house, but anyway, they were all from Milford. And you said to me, and it's a great point, when you're responding to a situation, you need to understand the culture. You need to understand what you're going into. And I see the same thing, and sometimes I think I'm getting old, but I drive by the firehouses at night, and I see the guys, you know, outside, and I'm like, who is that? You know, it's life, it's a change, but they're all Milford people that care about the community. And across the street that night was a classic example of how they care about this community. And so I can't say thank you to the both of you more for creating the environment, because you guys created it. We didn't, you did. You created it. And again, as chairman of the Board of Selectmen, I wanted to bring you in tonight. I wanted to personally tell you that I was sorry that I didn't recognize you that night, although you both were here. But I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for the great leadership in both those departments, because to Tom's point, there aren't a lot of communities that can say that their fire and police departments work so close together like ours, and they do. They do. I mean, there's many a night I come home from Mendon, and I see cruisers parked in front of the firehouse, and they're just having conversation. It's about relationships. It's
They're
about
good cooks.
yeah.
That too.
I have to be honest. They are good cooks.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you very, very much for everything you do for the community.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next on scheduled appointments is Jean's doing business as Golf and Grill, a change of manager request. And up comes our famous attorney, Mr. Antonellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay.
Infamous?
I was going to say, you know, wow, one little word in front of it changes everything, doesn't it?
On
Thank
which
you.
side of the table you sit.
Right. For the record, obviously, Joseph Antonellis on behalf of the applicant. I think you're all familiar with Gene Sardini and the Sardinia family and their role in Milford and the commerce of Milford and their involvement in beautifying property here on Route 109 and in other spots. And the restaurant that they put into their facility, the 19th hole, has had a pretty successful year. And you know it's a very competitive business. Our past manager has been in and out of our lives, and it's time to move forward and make a change. Gene is a principal of the corporation, a stockholder therein, a member of the family that runs the business, and believes that from this point forward, it would be best if he took the role as manager, which would obviously give him the responsibility of supervising the day-to-day operation of the liquor sales. He has received all his TIF certifications, and they're up to date. I believe all of our workers' comp, et cetera, information to the town. Our license was properly renewed. I believe everything else is in order. And again, as you talked about, Mr. Chairman, about knowing the people in the community, Gene and his family are members of this community, and I think is in the best position to make management decisions there, and would feel more comfortable having that responsibility on him than on anyone else. So we would respectfully request that you authorize a change of manager of Gene Sardini to be manager of record for the facility.
Bill, I'll open it up to you.
Yeah, it's funny, I was looking at one of the facilities the other day from Stock's Barbershop. I was thinking how great it looked. Thank you. And it's on our main street. But at the same time, I don't have any questions. You've explained it well. This is a change of manager for somebody who's been a fixture in Milford, so I have no questions, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I certainly don't have any questions either.
So with that, Mr. Chairman, if it's all right by you, I'd like to propose or make a motion that we approve the change in manager to Virginio C. Sardinia Jr. For the entity name Genesis LLC,
I'll second that.
Genesee LLC.
And I would make that unanimous.
Thank you. We appreciate your time, and as always, thank you to Rick and his staff. Liquor license applications have changed over the last few months, and it's always nice to have someone taking a look to make sure they're done properly. And Rick
they
is-
do a good job.
People have been cooperative as always, as they usually are. Thank you.
And Attorney Antonellis, you make a valid point, and I just want to go on record to say about the Sardinia family. They've been entrenched in this community for a long time. Everything they do is first class, first class. So, Gene, thank you.
I'll make a preliminary announcement. Wait till the end of the spring when you see the changes to the landscaping and the corner there. I think you're all gonna be very happy with what happens there.
You know, Joe, I just want to bring up one more thing,
right
if I
ahead,
could,
go right
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman. And, you know, we talked about fixtures in Milford and folks that have made a commitment to the community. I know you help various groups fundraise. So this board doesn't give you anything, right? You earn that on a day-to-day basis. You come in here with the right people, you come in here and you're part of the community. So I just want to recognize that it's not this board that gave you anything, but in fact, it's something you earned. So I just want to say it that way.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much. We
Thank you.
appreciate that very much.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay.
And Attorney Antonellis, I'm actually going to bump you
I'm gonna
ahead.
stay, right?
You're not
Are you from Waters? If you don't mind, I'm just going to, only because Attorney Antonellis was.
Good luck.
2 in a row.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Gene, good
it.
luck to you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. I'll give you a buzz. Thanks.
So I'm going to go to number 4 in the scheduled appointments, which is Imperial Hyundai requesting a Class 1 dealer license amendment. I just wanted to disclose to everybody that doesn't know that I do in fact work for Imperial Cars. I am going to sit on this, and let's see what happens, we'll see what they have to say. So I just want to disclose to anybody that doesn't know that I do in fact work for Imperial Cars.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Joseph Antonellis on behalf of the applicant. With me tonight is John Nenard, who is property manager / engineer / surveyor for the main companies.
You wear one of those hats too, huh?
Yes, and, you know, the chiefs mentioned that the firemen were good cooks. Well, John's a cook and bottle washer, so we've got him here tonight. We have a very, I believe, simple application. As you know, the former, we go back, when you speak about Milford, go all the way back for me to Scott Ahern Chevrolet, and then Rizzoli Chevrolet, and then obviously Imperial following, and then the building was then used for some other purposes. And as you know, the applicant has also a significant investment in the Milford community, had the opportunity to bring a dealership back into Milford, the Hyundai dealership. Just as everything got started down there, Hyundai decided that they were going to take the Genesis model, which was one of their multiple models, and turn it into a specific brand. I guess like back in the old days when we had Chrysler, Plymouth, and Dodge, they were all separate dealerships. So we now have the Hyundai dealership with needing an amendment because Genesis is a separate brand. And in order for the applicant to buy cars from Genesis, he has to be an approved dealer, which he can't be without your permission. So we're here tonight to seek for the change in the application. We had some delays in getting here because we've had to do some site plan issues clean up. The original site plan that was in place for when it went into a gym required certain things that don't make sense for the dealership. And we went back to the planning board and they made some changes, but then we had to go to the zoning board to get a waiver so that the parking can be closer to Hamilton Street than otherwise would be allowed. That variance was granted with conditions. Those conditions have been incorporated into a revised site plan that John is filing with the planning board. We do not expect any opposition because again, it's been vetted out through the zoning board. There'll be some new striping and signage that will help keep anyone who wants to go the wrong way on Hamilton Street from going the wrong way on Hamilton Street. So we're going to put extra signage on our property, do some striping and painting that will help people from coming in. I guess what's happening is you're getting a lot of cars turning out from driveways or making mistakes and coming back down Hamilton, trying to get onto Main Street that way. It's caused some problems. We think that the addition of our site plan and the improvements that we're going to make are going to help curtail that. In fact, that was one of the findings that the zoning board made in granting our relief. We also had a couple little issues with signs, as every other dealer in Milford does. Not going to point fingers, but we cleaned ours up. We removed some signs from the window, had to do with the servicing, and we took balloons down that otherwise maybe shouldn't be there. People get very excited about seeing balloons on cars. But we've got those taken care of, and I can come in tonight and tell you that we believe we have a site that's properly maintained. Again, I believe that my client is one of the property owners in Milford who puts the most effort into making their properties look good in this town. We got a major piece on Main Street, East Main Street, as you come into the community, and we think that the overall restoration of the building is beneficial to the town of Milford, and obviously Hyundai, who is not the easiest dealer to get along with, has put some pressure on us to get this Genesis brand up and advertised. So we would respectfully request that you amend the Class 1 and Class 2 licenses to allow us to have the Genesis name as a dealership. Thank you.
I have to give you credit because we get reprimanded all the time because a lot of people say Hyundai. It's Hyundai. That's the proper pronunciation of it. So when you get with the executives from the company and you accidentally say Hyundai, they look at you and say, it's Hyundai. So.
I'm John Nenout. I represent Imperial Hyundai. That has been submitted to the planning board, and we are on the agenda for March 16th.
Right.
Just so you know.
Bill, I'll open it to you.
Yeah, and from my perspective, the request to amend the license to add DBA Genesis of Milford is separate and distinct from the issues associated with zoning. It sounds like you've already worked that out
Yeah.
anyway, so, in that you're that close. So, for me, it's independent. I look at, personally, I'll tell you what I look at. I look at what it was before. I look at what it is now. I look at the number of people that you employ and the people that you service from this community and surrounding communities. And I say to myself, my check is, have you made improvements? I don't get in a twist about balloons on cars. When we start over-regulating balloons, we're in a real crazy place. But that said, I'm not in the zoning business. But I am in the business of being happy to make a motion to amend the existing license to include Imperial Hyundai DBA Genesis of Milford.
I'll gladly second that.
And I will make that unanimous as well.
Thank you, and we
Thank you
appreciate
very
the
much.
board making that distinction. I could tell you that the applicant and his counsel and his representative conversed about it. We felt collectively, with our respect for this town, and discussed this with Mr. Valani, that it was best to come in after the zoning board had granted the
Okay.
relief and the appeal was granted. I think that was the right approach to it. Feel as though it's the best way to do things in this town is according to the appropriate procedures. We thank you for sneaking us in on this agenda.
Well, I trust, from your perspective, I trust your counsel and the way you approach this with the various boards and the way you have to navigate that. And I'll say the same thing I said earlier. The folks at Hyundai earned this. We're not giving anything away, and you made that area better, so.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very
And
much.
thanks for moving us up the agenda.
No problem. Now, I hope you're going home. You're not going to Framingham for another meeting.
I'm going home.
All right.
I need to.
Okay.
Gentlemen.
Thank you very much. And we'll go up to number 3 on the scheduled appointments, Waters Corporation. We have 2. The first one is a license amendment to 34 Maple Street. How are you?
Good, how are you?
ahead and
I'm Kelly
identify.
Sontag. I'm the Site Health, Safety, and Environmental Manager for Waters. And yes, we are looking to amend the flammable storage permit for 34 Maple Street. and this really goes back a couple years ago. My manager and I are both new to the company, and we were looking at all of our permits and licenses and found that they weren't being necessarily updated over time to reflect operations and our growth. So we're trying to do the right thing and work with the fire department and amend the licenses to make sure it reflects our total flammable storage capacity at the buildings.
Okay. Bill? any
I was just
questions?
curious, you provided everything you need. And you provided, we have the support that includes a recommendation from the fire department here. So, I was just curious if you have an environmental management system in place there. I was just
We
curious
do,
what waters.
yeah, we have ISO 14001 there.
2001, okay,
Yeah.
outstanding. Some of that stuff also catches things like this, so I appreciate you updating it. And I don't know if there's questions, but I'd be happy to make the motion to approve both licenses and requests from the Waters Corporation.
No, I'll gladly second that, and when I went through the packet myself, that's where my questions were answered. We had a recommendation from the fire chief, and Tom Wesley also signed this, who's a known entity and a good guy that we're all very familiar with, so you had some good people putting this together, so I'll gladly second that.
And before I go and make it unanimous, I just want to go public and say that, just so everybody knows, all the department head forms are all in acceptance of it. So, and with that, I will make that unanimous.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Thanks for dealing with the snow day reschedule.
No worries.
Thank you. And with that, it's our Human Resources Director, Maureen Gifford, on HR policies. You're always smiling.
I was just gonna say that.
Don't you ever
I saw
get
you on the
mad?
agenda. I was happy.
Thank you for the time tonight. I do appreciate it. So tonight, I'm proposing 4 new policies that will add to the employee handbook as it continues to be developed. There's no decision points for the board within any of the policies. It's really just asking for motion to adopt these independently. So I'll give you a brief summary.
Great.
The first one is our harassment prevention. The town already had a very well-documented sexual harassment policy, as is required by law. It's been in place, it's on the website, and they've managed it really well. This is just expanding it to all forms of harassment, and then putting in a more clearly defined process should anyone have a complaint. They understand exactly where they need to go and who they need to be in contact with, updating the name of the town council, adding my name as another person. So those are the adjustments that I made. And all of these policies have been vetted both by Rick and by town council as well. The next one is confidentiality. So it's interesting because within the job descriptions, there's a note for every position about the level of confidential information they will have access or exposure to. But there wasn't really a policy in terms of, so what, right? And so we wrote a policy that just reminds folks that while there is open meeting laws and there is freedom of information, there are also aspects of your job where you will come in contact with confidential information. And so what we were proposing is that every employee sign a general confidentiality policy agreement. And then we also have a secondary one that is specific to anyone who has access to payroll information. And it highlights very specifically what information they will have access to, what is available to the public, and what that process is should someone request it, but that it's not for general discussion. And so we would ask the employees who have access to payroll information to sign that one as well. It just crisps it up, makes sure everybody understands the expectations, and then how to move forward from there. And then the last one is around CORI, so the criminal background checks. Again, the town was, before my role existed, CORI checks needed to be done, certainly in certain departments. And so it was really the head of each department that would be responsible for that. No problems in doing that, but it makes more sense to sort of centralize it under one person. And so working with Rick, the youth center, the senior center, and the library will all now fall under my responsibility to do all the CORI background screening. It just makes it a little cleaner in making sure that it's rolled out. So I've gone through the CORI training that's required. And I've been working with Jen Ward over at the youth center to put a new process in place of how I will work with each of the department heads to receive the information, run the checks, get that information back to them. And I think we've got something really great in place now that I'll roll out to the senior center and to the library as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bill, I'll open it to you.
Yeah, before I get into the details of the policies, I just want to say my colleagues mentioned how you were always smiling. And I've only heard good things about your influence on the culture and the organization, and from individuals who now know why we needed an HR director.
That's
So-
good, I'm glad, thank you.
So you've certainly put your fingerprint on it in a very short period of time and been of assistance in helping people navigate through what are, ever-moving targets within the law. And so to that end, I just had a couple of questions. On the harassment policy, it isn't clear to me, and maybe I missed it or misread something, so I just wanted to check with you. Department head or supervisor's responsibility. I know that a department head can have a difficult time navigating this. So employees may come up to a department head and say, look, I don't want you to do anything about this. However, I'm experiencing this. It's the second sentence.
Yes,
So there's an expectation, since the person qualified it with, I don't want you to do anything, that department head needs to know that they have to elevate
they
it.
have an obligation.
They have an obligation, a legal obligation,
Absolutely.
and it's the right thing to do. So coaching individuals before they say the second sentence to make sure it's something they want to pursue is very, very important, but I didn't see anything that made clear the department head's responsibility and obligation, and not to be able to enter into some type of quasi-confidential discussion.
Okay.
When in fact I don't know that people know enough about that, and I know it's always a challenge in various places I've worked and been. The second thing, it talks about department heads, but it doesn't talk about the uniqueness of our organizational structure. And I know you had to struggle with this to
I
create it.
absolutely did.
And so, here lies the question. Is, with selectmen being the appointing authority, are they not to be made aware of the issue? It doesn't say that specifically, it talks about department head.
Okay.
But we may in fact be, by statute, the department head in a way, right? Because we
Correct.
have some responsibilities. Third thing on harassment, I didn't see the training sign off, and I was wondering how you were going to manage the mandatory requirements that people acknowledge that they've seen and read and understood it.
So the first, the sexual harassment policy is given to all new employees when they start. There actually is a requirement that it be sent out to all employees annually. They don't have to sign off on it after that. They only have to sign off on the first time. So I was talking to Kelly in Benefits, saying now that once we have an adopted new policy, there will be a signature associated with that makes sure that every employee has signed off on the new policy. One of the things that I'm focused on now, too, is looking into options for training, both for managers and for employees on this subject.
Great.
Because it's never been discussed or introduced within the town, it's important that everybody has sort of a level-set expectation around exactly what you said. First, from an employee perspective, what are the requirements of how I behave? And from a management, if it's reported to me, what do I do with that? We also have a manager meeting coming up soon, and I'm on the agenda for that as a topic too, to sort of walk through these new policies and what are the expectations, and because it's a room full of just managers, to highlight some of those requirements as well.
And if we could get some of that in writing to adopt.
Absolutely, I will.
It's just one of those suggestions that I've seen people struggle with.
Sure thing.
The last thing I'd bring up as it relates to confidentiality, I didn't see anything associated with HIPAA, and I know we have access to HIPAA records. And for those that aren't familiar with the acronym, I know people here are, but I just want to say it for the benefit of people at home. There's information that we may come across as a result of injury, as a result of,
Any kind of illness or
Insurance.
anything health-related.
health-related. It's health-related information that the town has a legal obligation to keep private and to manage uniquely. So, just a suggestion, as we talk about
Absolutely.
confidential information, HIPAA be included. I don't have anything else. I think you've done a wonderful job, and I just want to say thank you again for your contribution you're making to the culture of the building and in your role, because I look at those as two different things, right? The culture and in your role as HR director. Thank you. It just reinforces that, as an individual and as a board, we made the right decision, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Nice to see you again, Maureen. As we said, we look forward to it, and we're still very excited to have our very first HR director, and you definitely hit the ground running, and I will echo what Bill said. I've heard from a number of department heads that are apparently even keeping you busy right from the get-go, and I think they're learning a lot, and so that's also a very good thing. And Rick has spoken. Rick, I hope I'm not speaking out of school. I've asked, and you've expressed to me how well you guys are working together and how much she's doing, so just want to let you know that. I just asked him, just did a checkup on you, and just for full disclosure, it was all very positive, and I just wanted to give Rick that feedback as well. Bill hit on a couple of the questions I had, just because, again, being in a public sector employee for over 20 years, I've kind of had this, my entire adult life, seeing this, and that's what I've always done, had the first, as a new hire in a new agency, having a signature, and then when you said every new employee, are you having it like disseminated, soft copy or hard copy, and
Hard
then an
copy.
email? Okay. I
Kelly
didn't-
actually has them sign it in person, and you have to return it. I
Oh,
know
so
I
they're
did when
still
I was
getting
hired
the
as
signature?
well.
Oh, okay, because
Absolutely.
we always get it electronically, and just
Exactly.
opening it.
Yes.
You've acknowledged that you have it. And even though when people don't open it, they get a reminder that we haven't gotten a return receipt on it. But if you're getting a physical signature, then that certainly
I've
covers
actually
it.
I've brought up to IT to say, down the road, do we want to think about doing more electronic signatures to save on paper? I'm also learning what is required for hard copy paper in a municipality. It's the one place I told you when I started that I need to learn the nuances, right, of it not being a private sector. But we are getting hard copy signatures from everyone at the start, so we're in compliance for sure.
Okay, and this is putting you on the spot.
Okay.
Is there anything you need that you haven't been able to get yet, or there's any level, and I know, like I said, everything's been positive, but is there anything that going forward, we're in budget season, and, again, this is our first, we're not asking a department head that's been here for the last decade, so is there anything that you see in the near future or distant future that you may need, or?
Really training, and Rick and I have been really in lockstep. I'm thrilled with that, but I think it's important, we talked about it during my interview, of ensuring that employees understand, because it is a lot of information, and never having this role here before, setting expectations, and, folks looking at you, why are you doing that all of a sudden? Because it's a requirement, and I've mentioned to folks, I'm trying to start with things that keep us in legal compliance, and then more sort of soft skills that just make for a better work environment.
You did talk about that, kind of getting us through an evolution of.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I have actually a whole list of more than 50 policies and processes that I plan to put in place over time, but starting with the ones that are really most important to get on the record. And I will make those edits to this, and then we can repropose that as well.
Great, thank you very much. I don't have any more questions.
So, as you know, I'm a huge fan of yours, and I was so excited when you were brought on board. And you've done such a phenomenal job in the short amount of time that you've been here, just tightening up the ship, I guess is the way to say it. I use it as an example in my own company. We may interview somebody, but nobody comes into our departments until they've gone through human resources first. And that's so, and you made reference to it tonight, the forms are signed, you explain everything to them, you explain their benefit packages to them. Once that's all done, and, you've explained everything to them, then they come out of human resources, and then they can come into our department. I think one of the things, and there's many things that I'm excited about having you here for, as my colleagues and myself have been involved in town government for a while, and I used to always say, well, who's watching that? And they'd say, well, it's just the way it's always been. And I used to say, well, just because that's always been the way it's been doesn't mean it's right. It's fine. Well, what do you mean it's fine? And so watching you in the short time you've been here, tighten up all those roles, it's just a very comforting feeling to know that it's being done. It's being watched, it's being looked at. You're training department heads on proper, management of employees, not management of the departments, but management of employees. And Bill made a great reference to it. It's, you need to know when you turn things to human resources. You know, you don't get involved in it. Somebody may come to you and ask you a question, and you have to be able to look at them and say, that's something you need to go to human resources with. And you can go right now. It's not a problem. You can go right now. But you as a manager don't need to step into that territory because you're not versed in that. You're not versed in that. And so, you know, I just want to say to you that, great job.
Thank you.
Once again, every time you come before us, you continue to make changes in this community, and I'm glad to see that you're engaged with the youth center. I'm glad to see that you're engaged with the senior center. It's just another example of how the community is coming together to do the right thing.
And library.
Yeah, and the library, yeah.
I'm so pleased because in the last few weeks, I have now engaged with every single department within the town, some on a very regular basis, others as a sort of an as-needed.
Great.
I met before the FinCom to introduce myself to them, to the youth center, the youth commission. I'm meeting next week with the library trustees, and so trying to just, again, introduce myself, let folks know where I might be of help, and at least put the offer out there for.
That's a valid point, is that what you just said. I'm here to help. I'm not here to criticize.
Right.
I'm not your boss. I'm here to help. I'm here to, and when we brought on our human resources department at work, my life became so much easier because I don't have to get involved in that anymore. You know, and I said to you the night we interviewed you, I said, there's nothing worse than somebody coming to you and saying, do I have any more personal days left? Like, you have time to keep track of that? That's when you say you need to go see human resources, and they'll give you that answer, you know? So, thank you very, very much. Great job.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just one last question. I apologize for
That's
not
okay.
getting it. Will asked a question, and I just want to follow up on it about your needs, because you talked about training. We know that training doesn't come free, whether it's computer-based or whether it's instructor-led. And so the question is, so we'll see a budget in April? You
Yes.
didn't adopt a budget, as Will said, from a 10-year-old department.
Right.
So you actually have to establish one.
Exactly. And so I've been doing all the research, both for web-based, in-person training, some that are through various commissions, some that are more private, you know, folks who have a company that'll come in and do it. So looking at the costs of all of them, the amount of sessions required, all the different facets. I've written out a whole proposal, and I'll put that together. Looking at the full range of budget, what's the least expensive, the most, and what makes the most sense for the town? What's the right training that we should do? And so again, I've been working with Rick on that to let him know what we have. So the goal would be to propose something in the budget and get it rolled out right away and start that training as soon after something gets approved.
But if you need people to go to bat for it, you know who they are, they're sitting right here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we need a motion on that, Rick, to?
Yeah, I think there's some edits.
Yeah,
I
certainly
don't
that
think there
one.
was a request for any type of edit on the Corey. Do you want that now, or you just want to submit it all together? It's up to you.
I'd like to, if we can do the query now, just because it is a requirement to have a documented policy, and right now the town doesn't have one, so I'd like to get that one on the books and then make the other edits.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the Corey policy as provided by our HR Director, Maureen.
I'll second that.
I will make that unanimous.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night now.
Thanks, Maureen.
Next agenda item is the Town Administrator's Report. Rick?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just three items tonight. The snow and ice on deficit is in deficit. Highway Surveyor Scott Christofouli has informed me that the snow and ice budget is in deficit, approximately $69,000. We don't have exact up-to-date numbers. You know, we had a very significant storm in the last couple of days. So I just, as the finance director and I have indicated to you, we will now notify you and the FinCom that he will now need to deficit spend. So that's the first item. Second item is dealing with Chapter 90 funding for fiscal year 2020. We've been informed by Governor Baker that the Chapter 90 funding will total $200 million statewide, pending final legislative approval. Milford's Chapter 90 apportionment for fiscal year 20 will be $819,994. This is pretty much what we received last year, less maybe $1,000, $1,800. And finally, I've been informed by the tree warden that you may see National Grid crews trimming trees at various locations throughout town. That is provided for per statute. They have a right to prune back limbs that could impact the overhead distribution of power lines. The tree warden has granted permission for this work, and he will be inspecting and observing as the work progresses. So if you do see those trucks, that's what they're doing. And that's all I have tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you. Bill?
Yeah, for those that might not be aware that are at home about snow and ice being in deficit, that's not uncommon. As a matter of fact, it's more common than it is, it's more the rule rather than the exception. And the reason for that is there's a provision in state statute that once a community goes to a certain level of funding, they can't go back. So it's a general understanding between, because I don't want anybody to think that highway surveyor is not managing his budget. So there's a provision in there that doesn't allow you to go back. So there's an understanding between finance, accounting, and highway that we'll likely be in this situation generally about every year, and that it's understood and that we'll fund it. We have to fund snow removal. There's just not necessarily a willingness to bake in a hard number that's much greater every year. So it's a quirky thing from a state accounting perspective, but that's just how it is. The only other thing, Rick, I just had a question, Mr. Chairman, through you. I'd like to follow up with Rick. I don't know do you know if that tree ever got removed? And you don't have to know the answer now. If you could check on the one at Memorial School in the pathway near the doorway.
Sure, I can check on that.
I know it was
think it was-
taped off yellow.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I think it's clearly dead and
Yeah.
represents a safety hazard,
Yeah.
which the tree warden had acknowledged. I was just curious when it's coming down.
I will get back to you on that. Sure, thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
No, I think I'm all set. I had something that but I'll wait till new business.
Okay. Thank you. I want to just publicly go out and say to Scott Crisafulli and his crew, I had many people tell me, just using as an example, the last storm that we had, and anybody that was crazy like myself that was up with the dog outside at midnight, realized that the storm was a lot more than what they thought it was going to be as I stood out on the side lawn. But I had a number of people reach out to me and say they were amazed as they were heading off to work that day how the streets of Milford were versus, and I'm not naming any communities, but other communities that they crossed into that were nowhere near in the condition that the town of Milford was in. So when you hear us talk about deficit spending on the ice and snow, to Selectman Buckley's point, for my 2 years on the board, it's always been the point, and it always gets adjusted in the May town meeting, if I'm not mistaken. And so it's typical, so don't be alarmed by that. But I think what all of us as residents of the town of Milford need to do is to take a minute and say thank you to the men and women that work on our highway department, to our highway surveyor. You know, that they're out all night long. They're out all night long, and you know, and it's the aftermath. You know, they get the roads all cleaned up, and they get all the parking lots of the schools and town hall all cleaned up. And yeah, they go home and they sleep for a little while. But while we're home sleeping the next evening, they're back out now, up in the center of town, pulling all the snow out of the center of town. You see all the snow plow, the sidewalk, snow blowers and plows cleaning the sidewalks. As an example, I came down Cedar Street today, and the sidewalks on Cedar Street were down to cement. It's just amazing to me that people, not only children, but people can walk down those sidewalks and not have to worry about slipping. So I just, you know, wanted to say great job to our highway department, to our highway surveyor, and thank you for the continuous great work that you do every single time, because the storm that we just had wasn't supposed to be the storm that it was, and you handled it very well, so
It was
thank you.
double.
Yeah.
Double what they predicted.
Yeah, absolutely, so.
Mr. Chairman, at this point, if we're moving on, could we advance the IT selection, only because Maureen's here and she played a part in it?
Absolutely,
And,
sure.
And seeing no one else here, maybe we could let her get home.
Great. I thought you just were staying because you wanted to watch the Selectmen's meeting.
Ah,
That
No?
I'll let her,
That too.
yeah.
Thought it was forgotten
No.
Wasn't trying to hurry you along.
No, that's okay. I forgot that there was something in between, but we could do it this way, I think, if that's okay with the board.
Yes, it is.
Be G1, it's the IT technician appointment. If we could just advance that under new business, and I'll let Maureen.
Oh, sorry, I left my papers back
Here
there.
you go.
Here you go.
Don't mind.
So we did have a vacancy for an IT tech support technician. I've been working with Andy on that process and with Zach as well. So we posted on Indeed, we're trying to put a new process in place for the town and follow that standard for every position that comes available. It's working out really well. I'm adopting it in different departments, and so far, we're on track. So we ended up with 135 applicants for the position. We're weeding through all of those. Now, not all of them are qualified specifically for what we're looking for, but we narrowed that field down to 11 applicants that we thought showed real strength based on their resume. I did all the pre-screening to see, and then from there, we brought a number of candidates in. We did make an offer for 6 candidates to come in. 2 ended up withdrawing their application. 1 had another job, and then 1 just changed his mind. And so then we did the interviews, and during the interviews themselves, it was myself, Andy Diorio, and then Zach Taylor. And so, based on that, Zach felt very strongly that one of the candidates really shone above the others, and he had a recommendation to make, and I apologize, now you don't have your paper. So we
okay.
would like to recommend Matt Arena for the position of IT tech support.
I've got a packet in front of me. It outlines exactly what Maureen has just said, and it gives a great deal more than that by providing resumes for the other people that weren't selected in the finalists. So with that, I don't have any questions, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion that we appoint to the position of Technology Support Technician Matthew Arena at a level 2, step 3, under Article 2, with a starting hourly rate of $24.04.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to second that, but I do have a question. Level 2, step 3, is that going to be any issue with the Personnel Board?
No, well, let me not speak for them.
I just
but
wanna,
We need to
again-
go to the Personnel Board. I think in this case, in reviewing the paperwork and speaking with Maureen, his experience, again, I didn't meet the gentleman, but I have very much confidence in the 3 of them that this is the person they would like. And I, for one, do not have a problem with that recommendation. And so we're going to ask this board to appoint with that recommendation, and then Maureen at the next meeting of the
Pending.
Personnel Board, correct. will-
Again, and I know
pending their
everybody
approval.
knows
No
why I'm
question.
saying this.
No
I
question.
have no problem. We have to
Yep.
be competitive. If this is, if
Yeah.
if you and Maureen are saying this is where we should appoint him, I fully, but there was some confusion. We made a recommendation the last time, and it turned into a circus.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
is
and
a
we've done this a
recommendation.
number of
He will,
times.
let me just be clear, until we get to that next meeting, if he starts before then, he will start at
Level 1.
level 1, okay?
One step one, and he's aware of that and
Okay. And he's
understands
been
that
so
in order for
informed.
it to change, it needs to be blessed by both this board and the Personnel Board. So he comes in knowing how it will work.
Okay, and I really appreciate you letting us know that the candidate is aware of how it
Yes,
works as well.
absolutely.
All the candidates, because some of them, you know, yeah.
Well, I gladly second that. Thank you.
Or I make that,
Mr.
you-
T-
Go
Mr.
ahead,
Chairman,
I'm sorry.
You know, Will brings up a great point. And, you know, frankly, I want to get Maureen and department heads out of this situation. Because the new applicant understands not only the technicality of the existing bylaw, but also has in mind a salary expectation, and may think of it as simply pro forma, a glitch in bureaucracy. So, you know, I'm not comfortable with that, and you can well imagine why. They know what they're coming in at, but yet have expectations that at some point during a short period, that we are going to work with the Personnel Board. You know, I hate seeing somebody come in on one day at one salary and 3 weeks later getting an adjustment to compensate. So I'm struggling in my mind what to do with this, because I'm glad Will brought it up. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give it back to you. And I'm going to ask you your recommendations to work with Rick and to work with the Personnel Board to see what process we can use to avoid this in the future. It's not a great position for you to be in, the hiring department head. And so if there's a critical need for that skill set and onboarding and the process that we have to begin to invest in that individual before they're, really adding the value that we needed to open the position in the first place, I'd ask you to go back to department heads and work with Rick to see if there's a way in which we can compress that time to lean out the process, to see if we can, either by special meeting and a couple-day posting, or whatever it is uniquely to handle just that agenda item. And I'm already getting into solution space, and I actually don't want to be in solution space. What I wanted, I'm just saying, let's think differently, and let's see what else we can do. This isn't your system. You didn't design it. It is what it is. It's a quirky part of our thing. But I don't want to be in this position again. What I'd like to be able to do is, in short order, make offers to individuals that we know we can commit to, and in working with the Personnel Board, figure out a way to lean this process out.
Okay. That would be great.
Yeah, I gotta believe you want it as well, right? Department heads want it. Because that's awkward to navigate through with a new applicant. It almost sounds like, if I were the applicant, to be honest with you, it would sound to me like, I don't know if they know what they're doing. And we know what we're doing. We're just trying to navigate against, I think we can knock down silos. And I think there's a way to be very creative and lean and get this done in the way that you want it done and the way we want it done.
Sure, that'd be
So,
terrific.
so I want to ask you, I don't know whether to make an amendment. I don't know whether to allow the process you've already worked with the applicant go forward. I don't know what to do here, because I'm thinking about making an amendment that says that dollar figure pending the Personnel Board approval. Now, the problem with that is, if it doesn't get Personnel Board approval, the Board of Selectmen have made an appointment to a position and a salary that aren't going to be realized. So the question is, whose vote doesn't count? You know what I mean?
Right.
We've got a matter of record, they've got a matter of record, and I want to be respectful to them and us, but we've also got to be competitive. I think you can make a compelling rationale and argument for that. And I don't think you're going to be met with hostility, but at the same time, so I'll ask you, what would you like tonight for this position under these circumstances? And I'll follow your lead.
Ideally, in this one, we'd like to move forward because the candidate is aware of the nuances to this, right? And understands that it's a process. Personnel Board is meeting on Wednesday night, so we can put that proposal out there that quickly and make it happen. It's possible, assuming that they agree to the higher salary, that it would be correct coming in, that there would not be two salaries, that this person is hired
The
at.
expectation is that he will start at, assuming they do concur, at the salary, so they won't be starting at level one. He'll be starting at the recommended.
So you feel strongly you'll get Personnel Board approval?
I'm hopeful. I am. I mean, I feel like I can defend that decision well enough to ask them.
But we don't know what their questions are in fairness, right?
Exactly.
The reason I asked that question to both my colleagues' points is, in the private sector, we have a saying that you never offer something that you're going to have to take back.
Exactly. For sure.
So, whether an employee comes to you for, a raise in salary, additional benefits, you can never offer something that, you're not sure that they're going to get from, say, for upper management. Because once you offer it, once you take it back, it's a real,
It
it's a
stays
real
there.
problem. So I think that that's a process that we need to look at, that, before it comes before the Board of Selectmen, those answers need to have already been, gotten. And what you're presenting to us that we're gonna vote on is in fact exactly what, and I understand the employee knows, but I also say, is that really a clean process?
Right, I agree.
Imagine coming in and accepting a job,
Sure.
thinking that you're coming under a certain salary, but also thinking that if it doesn't get approved, I'm gonna be here. You know, it's not, in my opinion, it's not how you wanna bring somebody into the workforce.
I think you made a good point too in the timing, because the personnel board meets monthly.
Yeah.
There's these big gaps and we're trying to fill a need. Right
Right.
now, we have an IT
Sure.
department that's short one person and we want to get that filled. And we feel like we have the right candidate. So moving forward, we'll have to think about that timing. As you said, maybe it's a special meeting, maybe there's some other, something we add to the process that streamlines it.
And I'm sure that engaging with the personnel board, they'll look to figure out how to accommodate and what new, methods that together you may be able to adopt, because there's a chance that you could be 30 days out,
Exactly.
right?
Mr. Chairman, I think this is a really good discussion because, again, this is a process that goes back to the 50s.
Right.
Right.
That Maureen has inherited along with everything else. So it's just something that, well, it's always been done this way.
Right.
So I think that.
That's the way it is.
Yeah, right. So between Rick, Maureen, and the personnel board, and then maybe possibly making changes in the future at town meeting.
Yeah, if we
and
could co-sponsor
If not,
something.
it's not even about, it's not even about eliminating or the personnel board or going from the personnel board to an HR director. We had those conversations. They went sideways. The fact is, it's just, this is how we're treating people coming. It's so archaic
Yeah.
that we, in the town of Milford at 2019, we are still putting people through a process that
It was designed
I
in the
mean,
50s.
most people
Longer.
couldn't even relate to.
Yeah.
So I think that first we have to, during your interview, we talked about, first thing we have to do is admit that we're violating the law every which way because we don't have any policies. We don't have a human resource function. We not have sign-offs on some policies. I mean, again, it shocked me that I've been getting this some of these for over 20 years. I'm 43. I've been getting some of these policies by law for 20 years. And in the town of Milford, it's, oh yeah, don't worry about it. Our town council will take care of it if there's a problem.
it's the way
That's
it-
not the right answer.
No, it's the way it is.
Yep, so, and I have a sign on my desk that says,
Yeah.
but we've always done it that way with the red circle through it. And every once in a while, I just have to turn it and face it to someone and
Yeah,
go,
how'd that go
look,
over?"
I don't like change either, but we got to move along. so.
Maureen, how'd that go over? I know you're from the private sector. How'd that go over if you answered, went palms up and said, well, that's the way we've always done it?
Exactly.
It didn't get well received, right? So we've got a process. We
Yeah,
think
and I'm
it's-
glad we are moving forward on this. It's important. Andy's literally on his own
All right, so we
for,
got a motion, we got a second,
yes.
and I would make that unanimous as well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Sorry to put that extra burden on the hire, but
Thank you.
Okay, next under new business is the Greenleaf Garden Club Annual Plant Sale.
did we jump to new business?
Yeah, well, I jumped just for Maureen, so if you want to,
We got to go back to old business.
if you want to jump
Oh,
back
sorry,
to
sorry,
the,
sorry, sorry.
to the selectmen,
I'm
to
sorry,
the
Town
articles.
Administrator, the town meeting articles.
Just briefly, I put a memo together that will show you the articles that have been proposed with some of the background submissions. They're broken down by, obviously, sponsors of the articles, so selectmen, fire chief, accountant, treasurer, planning board, et cetera. And those are the articles that are presently submitted to be considered for the warrant, which we will hopefully bring to you at your next meeting on Monday, March 18th. And I think the board at a prior meeting asked to just get some information beforehand, before the warrant's kind of just put in front of you that way. So,
Rick, before I turn it to Bill, and I've looked at these extensively, and I don't really have any problems, but I do have questions, and the one that I have questions with is the Citizens Petition Group.
yeah.
There's no information as why they want to change the local election to November, like, there's nothing from what Amy's stance is on it. I think Amy, as the town clerk, should have some buy-in to it. And then I'd like to see why they would like to increase the Board of Selectmen from 3 members to 5 members.
Yep.
That's just my personal opinion. It's put on as an article, but yet there's been no discussion about it, no information brought forward to us about it.
Mr. Chairman, I think what makes that unique, and I fully, by the way, I fully appreciate what you just said. I think because it's a citizen petition, it's actually, we should obviously see the article once it's submitted.
Right.
But it's really up to these individual citizens or groups to make their argument. on the floor at town meeting, and hopefully, and I really appreciate you bringing up the town clerk, because, that's gonna be a big piece of at least how I would support that.
Right.
So, again, I appreciate you bringing that up and making the points you made. But I do think it's certainly on those citizens to make their case on town meeting floor, which is gonna be, very interesting, because I don't know about number one, but the second article regarding to the members of the Board of Selectmen, that was something that was probably last talked about, I would probably say nearly 20 years ago. I remember being a town meeting member and that being talked about. So I think it's something that, other towns, as they grow, they add additional folks. Not that that necessarily changes anything, but it'll be interesting to hear what the arguments are for those. So I just wanted to add on to that, because I appreciate you bringing up those points.
Thank you. Bill?
Yeah, so it all depends what the purpose of this discussion is and what the vote is. By statute, we're allowed to include things in the warrant or exclude things from the warrant. And so I view this discussion as one of either allowing something on the warrant or not allowing something on the warrant. I think there's opportunity later, before the Maytown meeting, to decide where the board stands with respect to support or not support. Or have no position. We've done that too. So,
That's interesting, Bill, because I think there are some cases where it's best to just let it work through the process. If you know something's gonna be detrimental to the town right off the bat, or cause, I think,
Right.
harm in some way, we're the gatekeepers, and we can certainly stop something before it happens. Also, some things need to go through the course and allow for debate. So I think that's when we take no action, it's a
In
lot of
terms of
times, it's
support.
actually taking action to let the process follow through, so.
right, and, I'm glad we brought this up, because I, made some notes that, I think when we talk about, generally changing the way we do business, the way we just talked about how the way we always did it isn't necessarily the right answer going forward. However, when we make changes that are significant, whether it's to the election cycle or to the number of board members, as an example, on citizens petitions, I think it's incumbent upon town meeting to be given answers and an understanding, number one, what problem are we solving? And how we get feedback through the community before something becomes an article. With that said, the short notice of the article could lead to its failure, regardless of the pros and cons, simply because people haven't had the opportunity to look at it. Again, I kind of view this as a solution in search of a problem, at least as I understand it today, because I've been given no information. So I'm not sure what we're fixing. I have no intention of voting not to put it on the warrant. I don't hear anybody else saying that either. So I think if we're setting up, Mr. Chairman, and I'll ask you, if we're setting up a vote to decide what articles should be on the warrant, regardless of whether we're in favor of them or not, we should take those votes separately.
Right,
So
but I
you
don't think
decide.
tonight's a need for a vote, correct, Rick?
There's not a need to vote on or discuss merits or where your positions are. Again, I put these in front of you, as Bill stated correctly, that the board needs to determine, though, at some point, what do you want on the warrant, and is there anything you don't want on the warrant? We will be putting everything on the warrant that's here unless you say otherwise, I guess. So on the
So,
18th.
Quite honestly.
We should vote.
Right, it's
Well,
necessary.
Again, you're not voting, as you said, on the merits of anything, or taking a position, or
Okay. All
staying
right,
neutral on
I'm
something.
good. Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, but I think, again, we would like to have a warrant in front of you,
Yep.
for final approval on the 18th. Maybe something
Well,
changes
that
on the
goes back
18th.
into what Mike said is, when I look at this, the interesting thing is, and I remember, again, I think it was around 20 years ago, when town meeting talked about adding 5 members to the board, they thought that would either add more discussion or get a more diverse board, or whatever it is. All 3 of us have a unique, I guess it's not so unique in Milford, have all served on the school committee, where there were 7 members.
Right.
There's difficulties to adding bodies and inefficiencies. You definitely get more opinions, but a 2-to-1 vote is no different than a 4-to-3 vote,
Or a 3-2 vote.
or a 3-to-2 vote, or whatever it is. And just like I also sat on the finance committee where there were 15 members. I mean, I always gave credit to the chairman, because that's like herding cats. You know what I mean? So that's one thing I was always envious of, anyone who ever wanted to serve as chairman of the finance committee. But, you know, I certainly think that if town meeting wants to take up that discussion, you know, we should have that conversation here, and then they should. And hearing from Amy on the elections in November, you know, when there's a state election for your rep and senator every 2 years, when there's your gubernatorial election every 4, and your presidential, and nothing ever lines up, that can somewhat make sense fiscally. But when you don't have a state election, because state reps, state senators, and Congress folks are the only people that are elected every 2 years. Those are the shortest terms.
Right. And
You're
you don't
gonna have
national.
you're gonna have a year where it's just your local. We think the weather is questionable in April, November. I don't want to subject our seniors, who are still our largest voting bloc, to November weather, saying, "Oh, this would be the good time for you to go vote."
And that's
So-
why I said I'm not
So
for.
I don't agree with either one of them, but
me either.
you know.
And I'm saying I'm not, I want everybody to understand, I'm not saying I'm for or against, it's, I'm.
Well, I guess I am now,
I'm
but I
with
just.
you,
I think
I'm
you
like,
have to have these
it's sitting here and I don't
conversations.
have any, but, you know, you make a valid point, let
Yeah.
it go to town meeting and let it get discussed on town meeting floor.
And again, we will see on the 18th on the final warrant, we will see what the draft articles will look like, right?
Absolutely, you'll have a draft,
And we all know that. I just want to make sure that the folks at town, because when I see those articles, I think that's when I will personally.
you're gonna get a lot more than what was provided
We'll
tonight.
judge, no, and I appreciate this preview, by the way, Rick. I don't want, it's probably coming across somewhat
no,
as
no.
like a criticism that we're having this conversation, but we understand why you gave this to us, and I very much appreciate it, because I've seen on Facebook and other things, other social media, about these things, and people having the argument and debate, and, you know, again, some of it gets very personal, but it's just the fact that I'm not gonna let that happen. I'm gonna adjust the merit to it, and having winter elections isn't always the best thing in the world.
And I went round and around. Mr. Chairman, just, you know, I went round and around on this because what I want to do through ad hoc committees and committees that this board supports and helps and creates is to get communication going. You know, we talk about Amy, but there's lots of people that need to weigh in on this.
Oh, yes.
Right? And so maybe what I'm, you know, one of the things I considered is to send this back to committee to say, can you look at this? Because we have a committee whose purpose in life is to try to increase,
The efficiency of town meeting.
no, not just town meeting, because this won't do that, the motions aren't for that, the elections and participation. And I don't know how this is gonna do that. As a matter of fact, I think it'll exacerbate the problem.
I think that's why it's so important that we really can't make a decision, or I wouldn't even refer this to anyone until we actually see the language of the articles.
Yeah, but I don't know that committee has looked at this. I don't know that, and provided a rationale. Those are public meetings, those where people can talk to the merits. They might suggest fine tuning, they might suggest adjustments, and I think it's through that process. I don't want to be critical of somebody waking up one day saying, hey, look, this is the right thing to do, I'm gonna create a citizen's petition and get 10 signatures. I mean, frankly, we can create a lot of town meeting articles that way.
Right.
But that's the process. I would encourage people that are gonna do it, though, to work with these committees, to work with town departments. You know, the town administrator and myself talked about this, and, you know, nobody's approached him on the pros and cons either.
Okay.
And so,
Good point.
Well, that's the conversation that I had with Rick earlier, is that when you look at it, you're like,
I don't know what to do, yeah.
yeah, it's
So,
you know?
I want to say this, and I want to be able to reverse this decision, because there are times a town meeting article can be mean-spirited, so I want to reserve the right, as provided by statute, not to allow an article to go forward. But I want to say I do that with deference to citizens' petitions and some consideration under unique circumstances. Frankly, we don't know enough to vote on this or not vote on it.
It's my position on it.
But I would make a motion, well, let's do this. This is gonna take a little time, but can we just briefly walk through these? Just, I'm thinking 20 seconds a topic. I think we understand what most of them are. Most
absolutely.
are self-explanatory, some are recurring.
Yep.
So, go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I mean, if you start with the selectmen articles, A, B, C, and D are just recurring, take charge of legal proceedings, expend funds received as fines for parking violations to pay the cost to collect, obviously utilize amounts received from insurance companies, from third-party actions to repair or replace property, and enter into contracts up to 5 years. Those are recurring articles that this board has done, and FinCom and Town Meeting has done for years. The other articles are, one, obviously, we need a certain sum of money to be used for legal and consulting services to complete the water company DPU case. The third one is being put forth to adopt MGL Chapter 32B, Section 9D and a half, but basically that allows a surviving spouse of an employee or retiree to continue the health insurance coverage at the same contribution rate that was paid prior to the death of the employee or retiree. Article 3 is just the recommendation for elected official salaries. We are pretty much close to a police collective bargaining agreement, so we wanted to put that article on the warrant so that I know Charles and Zach now are working in the numbers as we speak, and if we need to, we could fund that. Article 2 is typical Article 2, amend the wage and salary schedule. Article 4 is the budget. And the last one is the Police Chief Selection Review Committee. That committee is going to need a budget in order to really do the job it's supposed to do.
Okay.
So we're going to need to do that. So those are the selectmen articles. I don't know if you want me to go through them all
Well, Rick,
first.
even
or-
with the police chief selection, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
That's okay.
With the Police Chief Selection Review Committee, what the budget was, 20 years ago, or nearly 20 years ago, and what it's gonna cost now for consultants to do background checks and things like that, or however way they go, because I imagine the background checks, not knowing anything about that, I imagine the background checks for potential police chief must be pretty thorough.
That's probably the most significant
travel.
expense we'll have, and there could be some travel, too.
Exactly,
And obviously,
okay.
the usual
So
advertising.
I'd rather, again, them ask for, even if you can get your best guesstimate.
Yeah.
Or the committee does, I know you're gonna be there at least at the first meeting.
I will be there at the first meeting, yes.
And I think the direction, and Mike, obviously you being there, that, I'd rather them, however they go and do their research to figure out a budget, just to, again, especially if some folks haven't served on a board yet, which the bylaw specifically asks people, there's a few that haven't.
Correct.
There's certainly experienced members as well, but I think we want a contingency in there, and for them to ask for the right amount, because whatever they don't spend, we can obviously put right back into the general fund. I just want to make sure that, because it's such an important task, that they have well enough funding, and
They
they're
have the
not,
tools they
they're
need.
not coming back in
Right.
between or after even an October meeting, because this might take to the first of the year or something, that there's, we're scrambling for emergency funds.
Right.
And it isn't clear to me, along those lines, really separate from the police chief search committee, should we need to fund an interim appointment where there might be overlap? There may be no budget for that as well.
Okay, too, good point, yep.
So we may want to reserve it, we may want to pass over it. We first day with my new tongue. We may want to have a discussion about that. To see, where we think we might come in.
I imagine, yeah, Bill, I imagine that's gonna have to be a topic of I guess a formal topic on a very near future agenda.
Because you brought up a good point a few meetings ago where you talked about what it was like the last time we did this, how long it might take. There is absolutely a need to consider that, so we should have that discussion, but maybe we just put a placeholder. I don't want to sidestep the committee.
No, I was
It's-
gonna say,
it is an
I think we
option.
want to at least
Right.
put tools in their
Yeah.
tool bag, and then if they
Right.
need them, it's there.
Tools.
Well, that would be our tool
Oh, right, for the funding source.
Right.
for any interim that we may or may not do,
Yep.
right?
Right.
It's still a different discussion. The point is, I guess, we won't have a chance to go back
Right.
if we decide to do something in June that we didn't fund in the Maytown meeting.
No, and I think that's where, Rick, if you could do some research, because again, if, you know, if there's overlap, then that's where we would.
Yeah, I
have a-
think we did something similar, if I remember, for town council when there was the overlap.
And if we don't use it,
Maybe
we can
something
always
similar to
return it.
that.
Exactly.
We
Yeah.
can always
Okay,
return it.
we'll draft a
Pass
placeholder,
over,
right,
not use
okay.
it,
Right.
not get it.
Okay, Rick, continue?
Yeah, the fire chief, I think, alluded to the
Yep,
fact that the new
self-explanatory.
staff car. Town accountant are the usual two, we close out special accounts.
Yep.
And obviously, we need to transfer funds if we need to between line item budget items. The treasurer, those three that are on the first page are, again, three that we typically do.
Yep.
Borrow, enter into compensating balance agreements, accept deeds in lieu of foreclosure. The fourth one there, if you remember at the October special town meeting, we did have an article that was approved at town meeting to authorize the treasurer to enter into payment agreements with persons entitled to redeem parcels and tax title. It went for legislative approval. The Attorney General had just one little issue with it and gave us some corrective language. So that's why we are putting it
Incorporate
back
it.
on. And when you see the article, you'll see what the discrepancy was. So that's why that's there again. I think, obviously, the planning board, I think you guys are also familiar with this one, projecting signs that we've talked about, that I think they're gonna get behind, and I'm pretty sure this board is too. The Geriatric Authority, way back in October 2007 at a special town meeting, the town meeting voted to eliminate the requirement to make payments to the town in lieu of taxes. For whatever reason, that was not submitted for legislative approval, so it's almost a corrective action the town meeting would be taking. The police chief has one that we hope will allow us to deal with abandoned vehicles in a more timely fashion. We would accept statute that would allow the police department to immediately remove abandoned vehicles from neighborhoods. Whereas now we can't do that right away, so you could be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So, and again, I think when you see the full one. The next one is just asking for an additional beer and wine license from Canvas and Cup. We've already talked about transferring the typical article we have, paying off snow and ice. The citizens petitions we just talked about, and then the school committee are the two recurring articles for the school committee, dealing with school vending machines and the PEG access and, yeah, cable funds. So, all in all, not a heavy Maytown meeting by any stretch of the imagination. So those are the articles that have been submitted, or that, again, the budget one, we're gonna add that one.
So before I go forward, because I think starting motion process could work, the only question I had was with Canvas and Cup, Rick.
Yeah.
Sometimes those are petitions by the individuals.
I did look into that, and I did look at the last several that we've done. We have not required petitions from individuals. We did two in the October special meeting, if you recall.
The businesses move forward,
The
right?
businesses, yes, so we have not asked them
So this is a,
petition.
this is one that the selectmen would sponsor.
No.
No, we usually have the individual, in this case, the business, and typically the attorney for the business. And,
Like when the Water Street Meat Market came, they
Correct.
had their own attorney,
If
they
you remember,
presented.
like
they
Suzette
brought
Ferreira,
This business, Canvas and
I
Cup.
think Joe Antonellis was there for another one.
So this is not a citizen petition,
It
but
is
a
not,
business?
yes.
And we're just authorizing it through this?
Yeah.
Have like, it's a place where you can have like a paint night and have a glass of
Correct,
wine.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like,
Past practice
Yeah,
has
it's
been, we
not
did not
troubling to me.
require a citizen
Special
petition.
function.
I had that question early on, a few years
good.
back, same
Which
question.
we approve anyway. If somebody comes to us for a one-day beer and wine
Yeah,
license,
now they're asking for
Yeah,
a
it's
full.
tedious.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Back to-
So,
yeah.
so with that,
Bill, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I'm just going back to the citizen petitions. Do we want to invite, I mean, they can get 10 signatures, but there's a sponsor to each. Do we, as a board, if we're gonna make a motion, do we want to have each one of them come if we're gonna do it? Or just say they're citizen petitions, get them to town meeting and let them have their debate and make their case?
That would be my suggestion.
Okay.
And personally.
I
the
just
more-
don't wanna make a judgment on it if we were going to without hearing from them. I think that's only fair.
I think if we, my personal opinion, Will, is, and going back to what you said earlier, let town meeting be town meeting.
Yeah.
Let them get up in front of the town meeting members and
Perfect.
and explain and sell their rationale.
Yeah, and I think if anyone, because
I'm
I
the
don't
one
know.
that questioned it, but the more
No,
I
no,
think
but I
about it
think
now,
you've started a good thing because because we're unanimous on that. I just think that if there's, and I don't know who the actual sponsor is for either one of these, but if they're watching, they now know that we're not gonna surprise anyone on the 18th by
Right.
saying you're not allowed on the warrant.
Correct.
We're letting people know that be prepared and take it to town meeting.
Right.
So I think that's the fairest way to go.
Right, that's what town meeting is about.
So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I'd like to make a motion to approve articles for the May town meeting warrant. And specifically, I'll break them up into sections, the selectmen articles, as outlined by a memo from Town Administrator Rick Villani dated March 4th, 2019. Articles 1 through 8 that are selectmen articles.
Second that?
And I would make that unanimous.
The next one I would recommend for placement on the warrant is the purchase of a new staff car for the fire chief, or for the fire department, at an estimated cost. You know what? I'm not going to say the cost. I don't want to put the dollar value here because he may put a different value on it.
Correct.
I'll second that.
I'll make that unanimous.
The town accountant, I'd like to make a motion that we approve for placement in the warrant to close out of special accounts and the transfer between light items for town accountant.
I'll second that.
I would make that unanimous.
For the treasurer, I'd like to, again, consistent with other past town meetings, authorize the treasurer to borrow, authorize treasurer to enter into compensating balance agreements, and to accept deeds in lieu of foreclosure. And last, authorize the treasurer to enter into payments with persons entitled to redeem parcels and tax title.
I'll second that.
I would make that unanimous.
For the planning board, I'd like to recommend that we place on the warrant to amend the sign bylaw regulations to allow projecting signs,
I'll second that.
I would make that unanimous.
and to clean up the issue associated with the geriatric authority and our mistake of not submitting for legislative approval to bring back to town meeting, eliminated the requirements to make payments in lieu of taxes to the town for the geriatric authority.
I'll second that.
Make that unanimous.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve for placement in the warrant submitted by the police chief, his request to rescind the town's acceptance of Mass General Law 90, Section 22B, and allow the police department to immediately remove abandoned vehicles from neighborhoods.
I'll second that.
I would make that unanimous.
Also, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we authorize, that we seek from town meeting and placement on the warrant, authorizing selectmen to petition legislature for additional beer and wine license for Canvas and Cup.
I'll second that.
I would make that unanimous.
And I'd like to make a motion that we put for consideration to town meeting, place on the warrant, Finance Committee transfer of funds for snow and ice deficit? Or is it just, I'm sorry, for snow and ice, I don't need to get into the deficit.
I'll second that.
I'll make that unanimous as well.
I'm going to make a motion, in spite of not having any real information, that we allow and place on the warrant 2 citizen petitions. One petition to petition legislature to hold local elections in November, and let those cases be made on an individual basis by the proponents of those articles, and increase the Board of Selectmen to 5 members by town vote.
I'll second that.
I would make that unanimous as well.
Is consistent with past years. I'd like to make a motion that we place on the warrant for the school committee their ability to deposit revenues from school vending machines into the general fund and to be transferred back to the school committee, along with PEG access allowing use of PEG access and related cable fund by school committee for the purposes of making improvements.
I'll second that.
And I will make that unanimous as well.
Just one thing, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
There was mention of adding a placeholder for an interim chief if needed be as to a budget
Thank you,
item.
Rick. Good
So
catch.
do we want to add that one also?
Yeah, well, I'd like to make a motion and then see how the discussion goes. I'd
Okay.
like to make a motion that we add a number 9 to your list and place an article in front of the, or include an article in the warrant for town meeting review and possible approval, the appropriation of funds designated for interim police chief.
I'll second that.
And I would make that unanimous as well, Rick.
Okay.
Good catch, thank you.
It's okay. No, no.
Thank you,
I
Rick.
said it and forgot it.
Yeah.
Okay, next on the new business is the Greenleaf Garden Club. Gentlemen, the Greenleaf Garden Club requests permission to conduct the annual plant sale on May 18, 2019. We would like to be at Louisa Lake Park from 6:30 a.m. until 1 p.m. on May 18, 2019. Sincerely, Margaret Knowlton.
Move, Mr. Chairman, another committee who does great things in the community.
I was just going to say I'll gladly second it.
And I will make that unanimous. Next is Town Administrator, the fireworks.
Yes, so we did solicit a request for quotes as required under 30B. We did send out 3 quotes with specific specifications. We received 1 bid from Atlas Pyrovision Productions of Jaffrey, New Hampshire. Quote amount is $18,000. So I would ask the board to award the contract to Atlas Pyrovision Productions.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we award the fireworks bid to the only compliant bidder, Atlas Pyrovision's Production, in the amount of $18,000.
I'll second that.
I would make that unanimous. Rick, you have the next one?
Yeah, this is the time where we renew the 2 seasonal club licenses, Maspinock Rod and Gun Club, Inc., and the Sons of Italy Dramatic and Sportsman Club, Inc. So I'd ask the board to move to renew.
I'll move.
Seconded?
I would make that unanimous as well. Rick, you have the next one?
Yeah, next is just the board's recommendation under Article 3 for the board. I provided 2 listings for the board, one at 2%, one at 2.5%. Just a reminder to the board that we did approve 2.5% for Article 2 employees.
Right.
But I just wanted the board to be able to see the difference between the numbers and see what the board would like to do with that.
Mr. Chairman, consistent with Article 2 positions, I'd like to make a motion that we geez, now I gotta think about how we structure it. Make a motion to move forward with Article 3 for both full and part-time positions listed on the memo. Town clerk, assessor, assessors, highway surveyor, tree warden, selectmen members, selectmen chairman, selectmen members, Vernon Grove trustee, Board of Health chairman, Board of Health members, sewer commissioner chairman, sewer commissioner members, park commissioner chairman, park commissioner members, planning board chairman, planning board members, and moderator at a rate of 2.5%.
I'll second that.
I would make that unanimous as well.
You know, Rick, one thing that's not on the books yet, and I've got to ask through you, Mr. Chairman, if it's all right if I interrupt this process for a minute. Do we have to watch and get on this list the position of water commissioners? Just something to think about. I think, because Because I can make a motion now, or,
Pretty sure, didn't we at prior town meeting approve
Yeah, we approved the stipend.
salary?
I don't
I
even remember
understand
what
where
the
you're
stipend
going,
was,
though, yeah.
but we should probably add them to the list.
To the list, if we
Once
approve
a-
their stipend, they should be on this list.
they should be,
Yeah.
Yes,
and should be at the same rate.
right, oh, yeah.
Because otherwise, they'll just lose track by virtue of this DPU hearing process.
Let me check on that with, yeah, okay.
I mean, nobody's gonna be collecting the salary until they actually take the job.
Yeah, and
It
we'll
should
probably
be
be after October
prevail.
also, yeah.
Right.
If
That's where we could be caught off.
But I'd like to keep it in line.
Yep.
So, let me amend that motion and
Do
let
you
me.
remember what the vote, what the? what
We don't need to.
I was
We
gonna
only
say,
need
what
to.
was the stipend?
We don't only need to, if you think about it, we only need to include, water
Chairman and
commissioner,
members.
chairman, water commissioner members at a rate of 2.5%,
2.5%.
consistent with everybody else.
Everybody else.
Yep.
Yep.
We
And
don't
then
have to
for the
have that
price
base
just-
salary today,
we just
because
leave
everybody,
it at zero.
it's across the board.
Or would we need to budget it if it takes place in FY '20? So we would need the dollar amount, because we'd have to budget it.
Well, you don't think it's gonna happen till after October anyway.
Right, but that's fiscal year, it doesn't end until next
Right.
June.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Stipend was set.
I think it
Yes,
needs,
I remember voting on it, I just
I
couldn't
don't-
tell you what we.
I don't recall the number, I'll be very honest with
I
you.
wanna say it was the same as the sewer commissioners, wasn't it?
Mr. Chairman,
I
members.
think it was more, but
I think it
not
was
sure.
more.
It was.
We had that conversation, but it
Oh,
ended up
yes,
being
it
more.
was, it was.
We ended up all agreeing that it should be with the sewer commissioners, and then we just talked about it the first year, and them getting off to it.
So, I think we're making this hard. Let me just say this.
Glad you brought this up.
I think we ought to place it in the budget, just like any other position, and whether we hire it or not, what ends up
Give it
happening,
back.
it goes back to the general fund.
Fund.
Just like any other position, if somebody were to retire and we take 6 months to hire.
Right.
If they don't start until October, November, December,
At least it's there.
Balance.
at least it's
You
there.
just can't get caught without it.
Exactly, that's the problem.
Cause how would you handle that, Rick?
The only, I thought what we were going to do is we did approve the positions, we placed them under Article 2, we did approve the stipends,
Yep.
and
Funding would come from
then we
the
would,
enterprise fund.
yeah.
Well, then it wouldn't have to be on this, right?
Let me double check on that, though.
Okay.
Yeah, but I thought that
But
was,
it's appropriate we still amend this article for,
going forward, yeah.
Going forward,
Because
okay.
they would be, as we know, elected, I mean, we're gonna
Yes.
appoint the first three, but then they're gonna have to do what everybody else does, is run for a
So you're gonna
reelection,
keep your
rather.
Yes.
original motion?
no.
So choose.
Okay.
No, Mr. Chairman, through you, I'd like to amend the motion. I listed several positions, or all of the positions within Article 3. I'd like to include Water Commissioner Chairman and Water Commissioner members within that last motion, and to also increase, consistent with all the other positions we listed, 2.5%.
I'll second that.
And Rick, you're gonna do what for us? I'm sorry?
I'll,
Check to see
I'll
if we need a budget for the
check to
base
see,
salary.
to see how we would do
Okay.
it, and I'll redo the, obviously, the list to go into
Go add that.
for the article.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll do
I
that.
would make
also,
that
yeah.
unanimous.
Yeah, it was just a last-minute thought, Rick. I would have brought it up
No,
earlier if I had thought
Yep,
about it.
no problem.
Okay,
Nice
next
job.
on the new business, thank you, Rick, is the police department and the gift acceptance.
Move, Mr. Chairman?
I just wanted to remind you that there's a communication on the back of the Article 3. Are we going to address that, or Mr. Chairman, did you want to put that for future discussion, or?
I built that into the numbers. That is built in.
Okay.
For the clerk, is that what you're talking about?
Yes, because I think that's important. Yeah, and especially if, Amy's sitting, at home watching it, I want to make sure that.
That is built into the number that you see in front of you.
Okay, it is.
Do not have to add it. I should have mentioned that, yeah.
We
Okay.
didn't mention this one, position, right?
What is it, Bill?
I think he's talking about the town clerk and the correspondence behind the.
Got it.
First page, yeah.
Right. But that is built into the number you see there. You do not need to add to it.
Okay.
Okay.
And, Mr. Chairman, just for clarity, on the last motion I made to move to accept from the JAG Network, and sent to us a letter from Amy Leone saying she'd like to request $623 in total donations for the purpose of the memory of the Chris Swindle and our, the regional substance navigation efforts. request these funds be deposited in the Regional Substance Navigation Program gift account number 26244-4830. I just wanted to recognize it as different than what acceptance of a gift, and it's just it's an article clarification, or,
That's your motion.
yes.
I'll second that.
I will make that unanimous. And the last, under new business, is the fire department gift acceptance, which I don't have a copy of.
Actually, knew I had too many things in my file. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay. Do you both?
I don't have the police one, I have the fire one.
Ah, there you go.
The police and not the fire.
Fire is the only one I have. Right?
No, you just read the JAG one. You just-
That was the police department,
Oh,
right?
gotcha,
Yeah,
gotcha.
that's
That was
the
just
police,
moving
yeah.
of a
So now we're
account.
just moving to the fire department.
Now the
Okay.
fire,
Gotcha.
yeah.
So before I read the acceptance of the gift, a little short note attached to it. As promised, here is my donation to the fire department. Thank you for your services. This is Diana Heinslum, and I apologize if I
I think you did it perfectly.
gift acceptance to Milford Fire Department. Donor Diana Heinsom, 56 Village Circle, Milford, Mass. Miscellaneous gift, equipment and supplies. Total gift of $25. Very kind of you.
Move, Mr. Chairman?
Seconded?
And I would make that unanimous as well. Does anybody have anything else they want to bring up under new business?
I do.
Yes.
Rick, can we, you know, you brought up the highway surveyor, and that triggered something that a resident from the neighborhood
Yep.
up on Cortlandt Street talked to me about at the store last week, and I'm glad you brought him up, because I recently saw Scotty here in Town Hall, and I forgot to bring it up to him as well. But I think it's more than just the highway surveyor. I think it might also be the town engineer. There seems to be some, you know, I think drainage issues and stuff like that. And I know there's work being done, and I've talked to a couple of the residents up there. And I know there's some things that we really, you know, some of it's private property that's, you know, being affected, but what I noticed, especially in this last storm, is when, you know, Cortlandt Street, there's this water, which is, as far as I remember, has always kind of happened. It goes down in front of Sidney Smith's old property on Route 140, and there's a lot of water running down that street, and I know during the winter, and hopefully we're not gonna have any more, you know, winter weather, but can we check with the town engineer and the highway surveyor to see if maybe there's additional drains that they could have built on that street? Obviously, that's not my expertise by far, but that comes right down onto 140, and then from the hill behind it, that water has always come down. You know, it's a hill, gravity takes its effect, but I was just, during the winter, you know, after a storm, I make sure that I get out and, you know, go visit some people. We take a ride and, you know, just make sure everything's good, and it was. But I think we gotta have Cortlandt Street looked at, and I imagine that Scott and the town engineer are both familiar with it, but just so I can get some feedback to one of the residents that I see quite often.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, that's it, thank you.
No, I don't have anything, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and neither do I. And the last agenda item is correspondence. Does anybody have any correspondence?
I do not.
And I do not either. And we do not have an executive session, so
I'd move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second that.
and I'll make that unanimous. Good night, everybody. Thank you very much. And have a nice weekend.